I'm going to start with giving us a little rundown of the agenda. We're going to get, most people listening to this don't know who I am, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a background into who I am. Going to talk to you about the learning curve that I had with Tableau and some of our initial outcomes. A lot of this is going to then be taken up with what Tableau Public is, how I use it, and how you can use it to learn a lot about Tableau in your personal life that will really benefit you in the workplace. Finally, this is going to be summed up with looking at some outcomes over essentially the idea that everybody wins. And for anybody that's still awake at the end of all that, I'm willing to take questions. So the first part of this is, well, who is this guy? And on the left here we have, I'm Robert Chappell. I joined in 2012. Actually, this coming Sunday, I will be here 5 years. I started off here as a Java developer, and I wasn't terribly happy, or indeed good at it, and they moved me over to the audit team. And these days, I work as a Tableau developer, mostly reporting to internal systems. And you see the big red line down the middle, and that's kind of like dividing my work life with then kind of the other part. And that other part, before I joined, I worked for more than 20 years as a field archaeologist, and I'm also, as you're going to find out today, a massive Bob Dylan fan. And these are things that generally aren't useful or relevant in a business discussion, but they will be today, and I hope to be able to prove that. So let's come to Tableau. About the middle of 2014, I started hearing about it, about its names. I would think I'm probably among the first in the company to hear about it. And along the lines of, have you heard of this new tool called Tableau? I think you'll like it. It could be big. And these were coming essentially from two different people that I was associated with. One of them was Simon, my senior manager, and the other is Jeanne, my wife. And anybody who has any sense that wants to stay in work and married is going to listen to these two people. So I did the sensible thing. I signed up to Tableau.com, got a free account with them. I sat through a lot of their online video training. I bought a couple of books. I watched some YouTube videos. I got myself a basic set of skills. And the great thing about Tableau is that it doesn't have a particularly steep learning curve. And within a relatively short time, I was able to deliver a couple of small projects. And that's where I suddenly found that I had a bit of a taste for it. I was definitely enthusiastic about Tableau and about what visual analytics could do in a business setting. And the more I got into Tableau, the more enthusiastic and excited about it, and I became this term of the Tableau evangelist. I wanted to tell everybody about how wonderful Tableau was and what it could do for you. And as soon as I thought about that, I ran into problems. And the problems are that a lot of the data that I had been working with was either very personal data relating to company materials that I couldn't share or discuss with anybody else, or they were, for example, team metrics that team managers didn't want discussed with anybody else. And when you can't discuss and you can't make the case as to why visual analytics in general, or Tableau in particular, is good for your project, you encounter resistance. And when you don't have that ability to demonstrate, we were finding that a lot of people were going back to the simple old idea that, well, we already have Excel. Everybody knows and understands Excel. I had one person actually tell me, and I won't reveal his name, but their feeling was that our senior leadership didn't actually have the mental dexterity to understand what Tableau could offer them. And probably for the best, just to keep feeding them Excel. They were comfortable with it, they knew it. Of course, the other side is, if you can't show them all the cool stuff that Tableau can do. And I know it's a terrible old cliche, but I don't believe in problems, I believe in solutions, and I desperately needed a new solution. At that time, I was working with the internal audits team, so we got this idea together to develop a series of dashboards to show the work of internal audits and showing the mandated and suggested metrics that we required, with the sub-theme of what Tableau can do for you and for your project. And I'll be quite honest about it, there's also a very healthy dose of shameless self-publicity in this as well. And we aimed this at AT managers, and I'll be honest, it required quite a bit of time and effort, and unfortunately, almost nobody cared. So it was aimed at TMs and above, and it's a relatively narrow little band, but recently I was looking at the single most popular one, our landing page here. It had all of just a little over 100 views. I thought, well, considering, it's a kind of a niche thing and to a niche market, and it wasn't bad, except that when I looked into it a little bit closer, I realized that almost half of those views came from me as part of the development process. So nobody really cared about this, and part of the lessons that we learned were that realistic-looking fake data is difficult and it's time-consuming to create, and genuinely, nobody cares about fake data. And even with regards to Tableau, it's not in itself, it's not about the cool stuff that it can do, it's about the cool stuff that it can show you in your own data. And this is the chief thing here, that it's in your own data. And going from that, I realized that I needed another solution. And again, just to recap over the problems, that I wanted to show and evangelize to my clients about what I could do. I wanted to show people, well, what Tableau could do for them, but also I wanted to show what I could do personally. I needed to respect that client privacy. I needed to respect its data, and I wasn't very good. I needed projects to practice on, and the only way, whether it's a musical instrument or an application, the only way to get better is to practice. And I really, really liked Tableau, and I didn't want to go back to doing audits. So again, there's a very personal reason there. And this is where I came across Tableau Public. And on the plus side, it's free and it's almost fully featured, and who doesn't love free stuff? On the downside, you can't save anything privately, and I really want to call this out loudly and clearly: you definitely cannot use sensitive data. Just to double make this clear, do not, under any circumstances, use data publicly. Listen to Dr. Venkman. This will not end well. So the question is, how do we make this rather complicated set of interlocking Venn diagrams actually work? And the answer is carefully. A slightly longer answer is very carefully. The actual answer is that I decided I was going to use publicly available, or at the very least, non-data sets. And to do this, it required personal investment in my career. And that means time at home, working your own time, doing your own research. And this is what we've got to do today to get on your own careers. This is the very first Tableau Public data visualization I ever created. I keep it on my Tableau Public page just to remind me where I started. It is, as it says here, it's the financial health of Northern Irish archaeological consultancies. I showed it to a few people, and it had some very strong reactions, mostly that it was kind of terrible. It breaks design rules, it's ugly, it's uninformative, and it's difficult to use. So that was in December 2014 that I created this one. A couple of years later, this is the same data, updated with new stuff in it. We've worked through several iterations of it. It's cleaner, it's more useful, it's more visually pleasing. I would admit, of course, that there's always room for improvement, and I hope to do more on this and improve it as I go on. However, I would say that at least the Wookiee is pleased and Princess Leia approves too. But there's the constant idea of going back to data that actually works for you. And if anybody does the Tableau Public or the Tableau.com training, as I sat and did, and my first impression was that it was great to get this training, and it was free, it's easy to access, but you really learn by doing. And in my case, I learned by doing with data that interests me. And in this case, I had done the training on the mapping functionality, and I wanted to do something that I was invested in, and perhaps this is just how my crazy little mind works, but I thought it was completely normal and rational to create a several thousand line data set that listed every battle site, skirmish, and any kind of interaction during the US Civil War from 1861 to 1865, just so I could do it. And the set of dashboards that came out, you can break it out by battlefield, by strength, by the losses and casualties, and the missing and captured. You can then bring it into individual theatres, you can look down to the individual state level, and then at the end you have a dynamically filtered reading list of just the battle sites that you have been looking at. And again, I had done the training for how you create that link to get Tableau to open an external web page. And again, I just wanted the opportunity to put it into practice, to find some way of doing it. And again, and I'm just going to hammer this home time and time again, I found data that I was interested in, and that's what helped me learn. I want to do a bit more with mapping and calculations, so I got my hands on some Northern Ireland prescribing data. This are family doctors, the various drugs that they prescribed over 2 months in 2015. I would note that one of the main restrictions on Tableau Public over desktop or other versions of Tableau is that it has a 1 million row limitation. And for a lot of the projects I undertake, this isn't a big problem, but we prescribe so much drugs, or so many drugs in Northern Ireland, that's why it can only take 2 months of data. I don't want you to think that I live my life by every day as a school day. This one, I started off going, well, I just like Game of Thrones. It's filmed here in Northern Ireland, and I enjoy the show. And as I started thinking about the viewer figures, I started thinking about different ways of showing the viewer numbers in different ways and how those interact with each other. So you can take, again, something that you like and turn it into something that you can learn from. Here's one on road traffic collision statistics from Northern Ireland. Again, it's from the Police Service of Northern Ireland. They've made this an open data set. With this one, I wanted to do a little bit more to hone my presentation skills, work on dashboard actions so that you click on one of these icons here and it takes you to a different part of the data set. And again, just do a little bit more on my own analysis of that data. And in this particular one, you can dive down. There's a number of different tabs, and you can go from maps of where accidents occurred and how and over what time periods. Break it down to looking at collisions by hour, by month, and by weekday. So, for example, in this case, 5 o'clock on a November Friday is one of the worst times to be in an accident. On the other hand, 4 in the morning in May on a Sunday, much less likely to have a collision. Following from that, the dataset also has a lot of data on the road types and surface conditions, and there's a lot of information that can be gleaned in that. So again, I had a big interest in this particular dataset, and it's something that I pushed myself to learn more and do more interesting things with it, precisely because I was really engaged in it. Now, who's the most popular Doctor Who? If anybody is listening to this and you're a fan of the show, as I am, and a name has popped into your head as who's the most popular Doctor Who, you're wrong. The whole point of this is that it depends on how you look at the data. And that's kind of my fandom speaking at that level, but what I wanted to leverage for my business use of this was that Tableau allows you to use a functionality called story points, where you create a linear story through the data that preserves some degree of interaction. And I'd never used it. I had never been called on to use this, so I thought, well, this is the time. So married these two together and created a visualization you can walk through and come out with some interesting things from. And if you think that a lot of what I'm talking about is kind of theoretical and such, I want to say that with this one in particular, I ended up in one of our senior leaders' private offices with this visualization being shown on a laptop, going, look, don't get tied up in the fact that it's Doctor Who, but this is what Tableau can do for the project that you're proposing. This got me a very significant project, and it allowed me to show what I could do and what Tableau could do. I can't tell you anything about that particular project. Again, it used sensitive information, but I can tell you about Doctor Who. I have made the case again and again that use those data sets that you're in love with, the things that really speak to you. And this is one where I broke that, because I am not the most sporty person. I have no interest in sports. I definitely have no interest at all in Irish Gaelic athletic games. However, I have a lot of friends and family and acquaintances who are deeply into this. So I set myself the challenge of, could I take the data sets that I basically mangled together from various parts of Wikipedia, and could I produce a visualization that actually spoke and said something interesting to those friends of mine who are committed fans? So in this one, we looked at where the winners came from, where the runners-up came from in the senior hurling and football and ladies football and camogie finals, and where they were played, and different details about the matches. I would just point out that some of the more eagle-eyed of you will have seen the term hurling. If you're listening to this in Northern Ireland or have any idea of Gaelic athletic culture here, you won't need an explanation for what that is. Anybody listening on other shores may need a little bit of reassurance that hurling is in fact a very, very fast-paced field sport played by men, as you see here, with these long pieces of wood, very, very little sense of self-preservation. This is not just what happens when you have too much beer. This is the game of hurling. It is actually rather cool. I could go into lots and lots of this, but I want to kind of show that there's an overriding thing, is that if you go looking for it, there's data out there that you can visualize. I live in Northern Ireland. I have a lot of interest in how our tax money is spent. For example, this is the analysis of the Community Hall grant scheme from Northern Ireland that our government spent almost £2 million on. There's another one here that's on looking at hate crimes and how they've trended in Northern Ireland, looking at homophobic crimes, racist crimes and sectarian crimes over several years. And this one here in the middle is the renewable heat incentive, the RHI scheme, which brought down our local government and has so far cost us a little over £62 million. This one I'm particularly proud of because the Irish News, one of our local newspapers, picked it up and put it on their website. And don't get me wrong, you can do a lot of interesting things that kind of come under the heading of citizen journalism and activism, but it doesn't always have to be particularly serious. This one, for example, started with the question of, when did Robert De Niro's career really start to suck? And that came from an offhand comment between my friend and over a cup of coffee. And we started looking at IR&DD scores, Rotten Tomatoes scores, and Metacritic scores, and how you rate his movies and how you break them out by genre, by director. And then we started adding in other directors, or other actors and actresses, so you can look at how their career trajectories have changed over the years. Now, I promised you Dylan, so I'm bringing you Dylan. This is what I term the Big Dylan dashboard. It currently has data that runs from 1956 up until May 11th of this year, where he played in Dublin in Ireland, which was, if anybody was there, it was an absolutely amazing gig. And the dashboard breaks out in 4 ways. We have every city he's played in, his top 20 albums by the number of songs performed from them, and then the top 20 songs by the number of performances. And here we have this one, which is a little bit complicated. And I'll explain it that this is the origin of why this particular dashboard came about. It started with the question of Bob Dylan's never-changing set list. There is a perception among fans and connoisseurs that in recent years, night after night, he plays the same songs over and over, pretty much in the same order. And my rather geeky answer was to approach this from a mathematical perspective and take the average album release year by song, and you can work out the maths here, and basically then plot it as a bar chart. So the idea is that higher averages equals more modern work, and plateaus will indicate these unchanging set lists. For example, this is probably one of the most famous plateaus in his career, where from late 79 into the middle of 1980, Dylan seriously got into religion, believed that all his previous work was unworthy of being performed, and essentially played just from 2 major albums, Slow Train Coming and Saved, for this long, long period with only one song from 1969's Nashville Skyline. So here we know historically that he's playing pretty much a very restricted set list. If you see spikes in the data, what we're expecting is short sets of new material. This one that's highlighted is from a 2015 performance of one song, The Night We Called It a Day, on the Letterman show. And also we should be expecting troughs like this, where he goes back to playing older material. And this particular defined trough here are 4 shows in Europe during 2015, where he was only playing festivals. So the implication is that he's going back to more of a greatest hits work than his more current material. But you can really see this dividing line between pre-March 13th, 2013, where it's just jagged, he's changing the set list on a very regular basis, to this period from 2013 onwards that is really defined by plateaus. And just looking at that area of plateaus, at a top level we see there's something like 20 albums that he's playing from in that period. But the dashboard allows you to drill further down into it and see that, yeah, there may be 20 albums, but the one that he's concentrating on more than anything else is this album from 2012 called Tempest. And in fact, if you look at it, the top 6 albums, of those, only one of them, Blood on the Tracks, is from 1975. Everything else is 21st century music. Given the opportunity, I would talk to you on and on and on about Dylan. And maybe that's for another day. But the key takeaway here is that I got really into this. I pushed myself to learn more and do more because I had a data set that I was really passionate about. The other thing, and I'll just throw this in as an aside, I have found in myself, and I found in other people too, that when you're doing a dashboard and you build it and you say, well, that is the definitive dashboards for this data set. And it's a very appealing but wrong little trap to fall into. So here I set myself the personal challenge of reusing that data set without any changes to it, and create a different story, a different look at Dylan's work and what you can see in it. I mentioned that another part of my life was, and to a large extent continues to be, in Irish archaeology. And back in 2006, I got it into my head that I should create a resource of every known scientific date for Irish archaeological sites and artifacts. I'm not going to go into the reasoning for that at the moment. It's a long story that really boils down to it sounded like a good idea at the time. And I decided that I would call it the Irish Radiocarbon and Dendrochronological Dates Project, because you really just can't beat a snappy title. And the idea was to drag all these dates that are dispersed through journals, through monographs, through grey literature, and put them into one single resource. And at the moment, there's over 8,000 radiocarbon dates in it. There's a further 300 dendro dates. These are from tree rings. And it's pretty good. I'm rather proud of it. It's distributed. It's free to download as an Excel sheet. It's being used by INSTAR. This is the Irish National Strategic Archaeological Research Projects. There's a number of them that have used it. Professor Stephen Shannon, who's based at University College London, has used it as part of his prehistoric demography program. It's a core text on at least 2, if not 3, undergraduate archaeology programs. And at this stage, I've actually lost count as to how many PhD students, master's students, and undergraduates have used this for specialist projects. It's fair to say I'm pretty proud of it. But it's not a data set without issues, because it is essentially a very, very specialized type of data, even for professional archaeologists. And it really excludes those interested non-specialists, people out there who want to know about the history and archaeology of their local areas, but they're never going to get to this data because it's so dispersed, and again, it's very, very specialized in how it's used and what it can tell us. And my question was, from a very much an archaeological standpoint, was how do we reach them? How do we talk to them? And how do we get them to understand this? So in summer 2015, again, taking the most logical way to do this, I manually added geolocations to all 8,300 archaeological dates. In the autumn of 2015, I created a visualization of it all in Tableau Public. So just to kind of sum that up, that's 10 years of data gathering, 3 months of geocoding, and about 1 week to do these visualizations. And if you go to it today, this is what you see on the front page. You see a map of Ireland that allows you to select by individual county. You can select by the archaeological age, anything from the Paleolithic up to the post-medieval period. And then I have more granular archaeological age. So, for example, where you have the Neolithic here, it's actually broken out into early, middle, and later Neolithic here. One of the wonderful things that comes with Tableau out of the box is this little site crosshairs that you can, if you have a machine that has geolocation enabled, you can click on that, and if you're on the island of Ireland, of course, it then relocates the map around you so you can see what has been archaeologically dated in your area. For a Northern Irish audience, this is the dated archaeology of Northern Ireland, and for example, then you can drill into it a little bit more. This, for example, shows one of the areas that I was particularly passionate about from the late Neolithic into the Middle Bronze Age, so about 2900 to 1200 BC. A further page in from that allows you to look in at very, very narrowly defined ideas about chronology. These dates come back given as years BP, which is before present, and archaeologists being that little bit extra weird, we define present as being the year 1950. So it allows you these tools that calculate the years BP in slightly different ways to refine your search for both the physical geography and your time periods. And depending on your solution or your selections here, there's a further reading tab that brings you to a list of published references and to other metadata that's dynamically filtered associated with just the dates that you're looking for. The feedback I've been getting from professional archaeologists is that the visualizations themselves add to what I'm able to provide in terms of the pure data set, and that they are already becoming an aid to landscape and to temporal research. And what I'm really hoping in the longer term is that people will notice those areas without dates that will inspire somebody to say, well, maybe we need a research project to find out what's there or why is there nothing dated from there. But the real driving force behind this was to reach beyond professional archaeologists to those non-specialists. And this is all from the feedback that I'm getting through social media and through direct emails, is that it is allowing those people that don't have the specialist knowledge of archaeological dating techniques to get to that local level data that is just generally not available to them. And what I would kind of sum it up with is the rather clunky phrase is that it brings this appreciation of deep time archaeology to parish level research. And again, purely from the data visualization layer on top of the archaeological layer, so to speak, I want this to be a spur to further interest and engagement for anybody, no matter who they are and how they interact with this. So you've all been listening very, very patiently to this, and I hope you're all still there. And I hope I've been successful in trying to show you how I've been leveraging my personal interests to build up on skills that benefit me in an enterprise way. And I really want to, if you've not been picking up on that so far, I really want to hammer it home that this is not just a guy wasting your time for half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, talking about his personal hobbies. And what I wanted to show you is that there are positive outcomes here where everybody wins. The projects I work on win because I'm able to talk to my colleagues about what I do or what I can do for them while respecting data privacy. I can take the issues and the problems I'm having to either colleagues or to external Tableau forums and talk about the things I'm facing using different data sets without ever compromising data security. And sometimes, most importantly, it has allowed those conversations with colleagues and with our senior leadership that may start with an individual data set, but allow me to facilitate that Tableau evangelism and say, this is what this tool and what data analytics can do for you. I would also say that I certainly have won from this, and I know this is not an approach that will suit everybody or everybody would be interested in that wants to develop skills in Tableau, but I can tell you from my perspective, I've gotten much better. I'm more knowledgeable, I'm faster, I'm more consistent, I'm more productive. Don't for a second think that I know it all. I still have an awful long way to go, and I want and need to learn more, but this has been a really, really great way of leveraging my interest to help me to learn and to be more productive in the company. With that, I'm going to say anybody that's interested in following up on any of this material, you can find I have a Tableau public page. If you're interested in the whys and wherefore of the radiocarbon project that I worked on, you can find the deck that for a talk I've given on that. I run 2 blogs because obviously one isn't enough to take up my free time. There's an archaeology one, and there's Demon Core Data, where I blog about data and about visual analytics. And with that, I will genuinely say thank you so much for listening. And if there's anybody still there, I will happily, for a few moments, take questions. Thank you very much.